Good evening. Good evening, good evening. I know that everyone's put in a full day at work, and I got to tell you, I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and learn a little bit about the school district and some of the things that we'd like you to consider this evening. But it's important that you're here, it's important that you're involved, it's important that you're engaged. Everything that I'm about to share with you tonight is driven by student and student priorities. And that's what this is all about tonight. So one of the things that I'd like to do before we get started is introduce you to people who feel the same way that I feel about promoting a student-centered agenda. Our Board of Trustees, beginning with the Board of Trustee representing the Hanks area, Mr. Paul Pearson, who's with us this evening. Our board president is with us this evening, Miss Patricia McLean. If you'll please welcome her. And from the Eastwood Learning Community, Trustee Debbie Lewis, a longtime educator in the Ysleta Independent School District. They genuinely care about kids, and so what we're going to talk about tonight is how we can improve the learning environment for students in the Ysleta Independent School District. By way of backdrop, you need to start by understanding that this school district has likely been the flagship school district in El Paso for 100 years. We're celebrating our centennial this year. For most of those 100 years, students left this district and could earn a living wage based on the experience they had in our district. An Ysleta High School diploma meant something. That continues today, although our focus has shifted, and we understand now that today's high school diploma is a baccalaureate degree. And so every day, 6,500 employees get up and come to work with that goal in mind, and that is to prepare students for college, career, technical schools, the military, or to be able to go directly to work. One of the things that is also true is that this district has had an experience, or has over at least the last 2 decades, experienced what we refer to as declining enrollment. In 1988, this school district accommodated 50,600 students. It could accommodate 59,000 students. Today we have 42,500 students. So for 2 decades, with the exception of 2 years, the district has seen a decline in enrollment and has lost students every year. And it hasn't been because of our academic program. We've got among the strongest academic programs in the city. We invest heavily in athletics, visual and performing arts, co-curricular and extracurricular activities, language programs, international schools. We want to develop the whole child. And in fact, those elements of the Ysleta Independent School District attract nearly 6,000 students every year who do not live in the Ysleta Independent School District. So of those 42,300 students, 6,000 of them live in Socorro, El Paso, Canutillo, and Clint. But they come to school here because they know that they're going to receive a world-class education. And that's something that we believe in and that we're committed to with conviction. But we can't walk by the fact that when you lose enrollment, you lose revenue. And so having lost almost 9,000 students over the last 2 decades prompted the Board of Trustees to initiate a demographic study. The demographic study was to provide the Board of Trustees, the superintendent, senior staff with information relative to our projected enrollment over the next 10-year period. Would we continue to decline and become smaller and smaller, lose revenue? With the loss of revenue, you typically see the elimination of programs. When you eliminate programs, you get less students, and it becomes a death spiral. The answer is no. According to the Templeton study, we seem to have plateaued. This district will likely, over the next 10 years, continue to support approximately 42,000 students. And that gives us a starting point when beginning to craft and develop a facility master plan to address some of the bigger problems in the district. And that is that when you're 100 years old, students attend schools that were built in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and those schools over time have deteriorated and need a reinvestment. So let me show you just briefly what we're talking about. That's what I was referring to. If you look at 1988, more than 50,000 students attended the Ysleta Independent School District. Since that time, again, with the exception of 2 years, we've seen a decline in enrollment. Today we have 42,300 students. Let me tell you what that means, though. It means there are 17,000 empty seats in this school district. It means that tomorrow you could close 9 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 1 high school and still be able to accommodate and serve students that we currently have. It means you could close an entire feeder pattern. We're comprised of 7 learning communities or feeder patterns, and the Jacob study, a recent analysis of our facilities, not just the condition of our facilities, but the utilization rate in our schools and facilities, indicate that at any time during any given day, 1 in 3 classrooms are sitting empty. They're sitting empty, but the lights are on, the utilities are operating, we're paying insurance for that space, and so we spend $1 million for every school that we operate unnecessarily. And at present, we're operating about 14 schools, 15 schools. That means that we spend $15 million annually to operate schools that the Jacobs Group has indicated we may not need. And so it's natural to talk about things like closure and consolidation in an effort to recover cost or to be better stewards of our taxpayers' monies. We didn't sign up to work for the public school system to take students from old schools and consolidate them into other old schools to save money. We're interested in rejuvenating, resurrecting this school district. We want to reinvent the Ysleta Independent School District. We want to provide students with a 21st century learning environment, an environment that's going to allow their teachers and support staff to prepare them for a world that is far different than the world that welcomed you and I. Our students need current technologies and emerging technologies. Our students need learning spaces that promote cooperation, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, project-based learning. And at present, many of our schools cannot accommodate that, are inadequate to accommodate that, and that's what we're addressing. Not any of what you're going to hear today is driven by an interest in saving money. Even when we speak about consolidating schools, and we're going to talk about some possibilities, we're not talking about consolidating schools because we're interested in saving money. We're talking about consolidating schools only when it leads to an improved learning environment for our students. So the Jacobs Group, this engineering firm that went out and they studied all 63 schools, and they found out that 1 in 3 classrooms are empty and that we're spending $15 million more a year than we should spend, set the foundation, but it was really up to us to decide what to do with that information. And so we've looked at it and we've considered some of the recommendations, some of the findings or conclusions that emerged from that Jacobs report. But ultimately, we know our communities, we know what they value, we know what's important for student learning. And so we're going to share some ideas, some interests with you tonight. And the whole purpose of having this meeting is to give you an opportunity to ask questions about some of the ideas that we're considering. But let me preface it by saying most of what I'm about to share are just ideas. They're interests. They make perfect sense to me, but they may not to you. And if that's the case, then you need to find a way to communicate that to me or to your elected trustees so that they can make me aware of how you feel about some of the things we're going to talk about today. I'd like to, for example, tell you what the Jacobs Group did. So the Jacobs Group broke the district down into 7 learning communities, because really, in our district, one of the unique things that we have in the Ysleta Independent School District is that we have 7 trustees, and each of them really identify closely with a specific high school and learning community. It's just the way the district is organized. It doesn't suggest that they don't care about the entire Ysleta Independent School District, because they do. But based on the way that this district has operated for decades and decades, they tend to identify with a learning community. So Jacobs, for example, came to us and said, let's take a look at the Bel Air learning community, for example. You've got 2,000 students attending Bel Air High School. It's got a facility condition index that suggests that the school needs about an $18 million investment. When I say the investment, that means that they've looked at what they need to repair, replace right now and for the next 4 years to make sure that that high school provides an adequate learning environment for students. It doesn't take into consideration anything that the school may need in year 6, 7, or out in the future. It simply looks at a 5-year period, and at Bel Air High School, that means an investment of $18 million, right? It looks at Hillcrest Middle School and Ranchland Hills Middle School. Both of those middle schools support Bel Air High School. One of them, Hillcrest Middle School, has approximately 500 students, but it can accommodate 1,000 students. The other has a little more than 300 students and can also accommodate 1,000 students. So one way of looking at both of those middle schools is to arrive at a conclusion that you've got almost 1,000 students, but you're paying for 2,000 seats. So what the Jacobs Group would suggest is that because either one of those middle schools may be able to accommodate the other, that you should consolidate those 2 schools. And again, they're looking at it purely from an economic lens, because if you were to consolidate those 2 schools, a couple of good things are going to happen. The first is, you have to understand that the smaller a middle school gets, the less electives we can offer. It's the economy of scale. The athletic programs rely on a smaller population of students. The visual and performing art programs rely on a smaller population of students. Co-curricular and extracurricular activities rely on a smaller population of students. And in some cases, these students still have to compete with schools that have 1,000, 1,200, maybe even 1,500 students, and in many cases there just isn't any competition. The other obvious benefit would be that if you consolidate 2 schools, you benefit from the operational cost of the school that you close. But again, that isn't what drives some of the ideas we've come up with. So one of the things I've been sharing with other communities and with trustees and anyone that will listen to me is that rather than consolidate students from one weary school built in the 30s to another school built in the 60s, why don't we consolidate them, but why don't we give them a brand new middle school? Why don't we provide them with a brand new middle school in the Bel Air community, something they can be proud of, something that's new, something that's modern, something that supports the faculty, something with refrigerated air and the capability to accommodate not just current technologies but future technologies, so that students can either learn in the classroom or learn outside the classroom, so they're not restricted by the brick and mortar that makes up schools. Because that's what a 21st century school is now. It isn't about what happens necessarily in the 4 corners of the classroom, where you're certainly not restricted to the 4 corners of the classroom. It's trying to emulate a college university campus where you can take your laptop out anywhere on that campus, a digital device anywhere on that campus, and you can continue to learn, you can continue to study. Learning has become a 24/7 proposal. That's what those students not only deserve, But that's what those students will need if we want them to thrive in the world that is waiting for them. The other reason that you may want to think about a brand new middle school is that if it costs $7 million to take care of Hillcrest and $4 million to take care of Ranchland Hills, that's $11 million. That's more than a third of the cost of a brand new school, right? But if you were to invest in those two schools, I'll give you a perfect analogy. You all know that there are people out there that restore vehicles. There may be some in the crowd. And there are people that find an old 1953 Corvette. They happen to have the resources. They invest those resources in that 1953 Corvette. And before you know it, it looks just the way it looked in 1953 when it sat on the Chevrolet showroom. The problem is that you still have to roll the windows down like this. The seats don't cool or get warm. You spend most of your life lost because some of you can't drive without GPS. You assume that cars always had GPS, right? It's still a 1953 Corvette. So even if you were to invest $11 million at Ranchland Hills and at Hillcrest, they're schools that were designed to support students who were going into a labor market far different than the labor market or the economic conditions or the global stage that our students are going to have to embrace when they leave us or when they leave the university. Relative to some of the other elementary schools in the Bel Air area, we would concur with the Jacob study. Some of those schools would benefit from an investment, and we've even had conversations around the consolidation of Del Norte Elementary School and Hacienda Heights Elementary School. Not, again, to move them from one or the other school, but to provide them a brand new elementary school. But since we're not going to be using Hillcrest Middle School, I thought, why not make it the first single-gender young women's leadership academy in El Paso designed to educate young ladies grades 6 through 12 in the area of STEM, an all-girls 6-12 academy. We have the facility, we can repurpose it. I think it would be attractive to families in El Paso and would attract families from outside the area as well. That's the kind of thinking, those are the kind of ideas that we need to at least consider. I'll share a little bit about Del Valle and Eastwood, but it's only because I want you to understand how we're thinking. In Del Valle, we need to make an investment in Del Valle High School, but because we've been told that neither Mission Valley or Valley View Middle School are fit to accommodate students, both of those have to be rebuilt. That's quite an investment. It's an investment we can only make if we optimize the utilization at Mission Valley and Valley View. So one idea has been to accommodate students from Marion Manor at Mission Valley and build a brand new elementary school that can accommodate 1,000 students, and to do the same with Camino Real Middle School and see whether or not that community would be open to having their students consolidate with Valley View. We'll call it Del Valle Middle School. It'll be a middle school that accommodates about 1,200 students, and again, the number of electives will increase. Their athletic programs will become more robust. Their visual and performing art programs will thrive, and they'll identify with Del Valle High School. And we'll close 2 old schools that are inadequate to support our students. Again, in my opinion, it makes more sense than investing millions of dollars at Camino and millions of dollars at Marion Manor. Let's invest in schools that will remain 80-85% at capacity rather than in schools that are currently at 40 and 50% capacity. We'd invest in the remaining elementary schools in the Del Valle area. Eastwood, a lot of the same. We need a heavy investment in Eastwood High School. It's our largest high school in terms of enrollment. They currently have 2,300 plus students who attend school on a campus that is far too small, on a piece of property that is far too small. They've regularly had challenges with parking. They've always had challenges with their athletic facilities, and so we've got 2 options we're thinking about. One of them is actually to rebuild the entire school in stages over the next 3 to 5 years. How would you do that? Well, we've got a great opportunity. Eastwood Middle School can currently accommodate the entire ninth grade. Why not let the entire ninth grade class stay at Eastwood Middle School for a year or two, and then with all of those vacant classrooms, we rebuild Eastwood High School and go vertical. Go 3-story. By going 3-story, you recoup a lot of the land, a lot of the property. You reintroduce some of the athletic facilities that they don't currently have access to, and you increase parking, address the old gym, and guarantee that those students will have a great learning environment for the next 25 to 50 years. Eastwood Middle School, we're not doing anything for them. 0. It's a beautiful school. It's what we want for everybody else. It's exactly what we want for all students. Middle schools, an investment in middle schools at present are among the highest relative to capacity. The one outstanding issue seems to be whether or not we've come to a point where Scottsdale Elementary School needs to be rebuilt as well. Again, let's not disrupt or interrupt students' learning. Let's go ahead and build the brand new Scottsdale on the back side of the property. When it's ready, we'll relocate the students. We'll remove the current school and create the facilities that they need, playgrounds, playfields, things like that, on the front end adjacent to McRae. And I could keep going on and on, but you're catching my kind of thinking. This is about reinventing a school district. It's not about accepting the fate that most school districts accept in urban areas. It's not about becoming Detroit, Chicago, Los Angeles, school districts that as they age, a lack of investment, of appropriate investment, a lack of available housing inventory forces young families to move out into the suburbs. When they leave, student enrollment starts to go down. When student enrollment goes down, revenue goes down. When revenue goes down, programs are eliminated. When programs are eliminated, more families decide that they need to go out and find a better school for their kids, and the death spiral continues. And it will stop. It will stop when the only students left in that school district are the students who don't have the resources to move out. So Hanks, in looking at Hanks High School, I think requires, I believe, $17 million in investment. So let me just quantify for you what the $17 million mean. It means roof, air conditioning in some cases, ceiling, carpet, tile, paint, interior mechanical systems, doors, hardware, windows, outdoor envelope, tile, restroom modernization, in some cases improvements to our facilities for students with special needs. It's a facelift, a significant facelift. We'd like to consider that seriously and make that a recommendation to the board when appropriate. Here's kind of a big one that I want you to think about, and I've said this before so you'll understand. It's written in mayonnaise on a hot summer sidewalk. That means it's just an idea. Board hasn't considered it. They haven't considered the cost associated. But at present, Desert View has a little more than 400 students at that middle school. And I believe Indian Ridge has maybe right at 600 students. We're talking about 1,000 students in the aggregate. What I'd like to do is I'd like to move the students from Desert View to Indian Ridge for about 18 months. It may take 2 years. And while they're at Indian Ridge, I'd like to build a brand new Hanks Middle School. I'd like to go in, start from the bottom up, and build them a brand new Hanks Middle School. The only thing we may want to reconsider is eliminating or demolishing their gymnasium. It's relatively new, and the cafeteria and kitchen. But everything else would be brand new. Then taking all of the students at Indian Ridge and bringing them back to Hanks Middle School. Again, a middle school with about 1,000, 1,200 students. A middle school where all the students know that their Flagship school is Hanks High School. And then I'd like to take Indian Ridge, and I'd like the board to consider whether or not it makes sense for the Ysleta Independent School District to have its own aquatic center or natatorium at the current Indian Ridge Middle School site. Whether or not that cost of living bond or measure that the city passed recently that will result in a brand new aquatic facility on the west side and another brand new aquatic facility on the east side, whether or not maybe the kids in the Ysleta Independent School District would benefit from a brand new aquatic program, right? And whether or not, since we have the property, we couldn't consider how we provide facilities for our gymnastics programs, our wrestling programs, a dive tank, tennis courts with a center stadium and lights. Why couldn't we make our own athletic and aquatic complex at Indian Ridge that would be available to all of the students in the Ysleta Independent School District? Something to think about. Again, if you're going to think big. It's just as easy to think big as it is to think small. Elementary schools all require an investment. We would do that. There are no plans at present to close or consolidate any of the elementary schools. There are some elementary schools in the Hanks learning community that could benefit from a gymnasium or a multi-purpose room. I believe Tierra del Sol is one of those schools. But other than that, that's the big project. And it's a big project. It's a big investment. But I'll tell you what, it'll separate us from any other district in town. If we could get that together, it would make all the difference. We're trying to change the trajectory of this school district. We're trying to reinvent this school district. We're trying to say that we're simply not going to become the same conclusion that most urban school districts become. The other things that I want to share with you is that in addition to the Jacobs Group looking at facilities and looking at electrical systems and, public announcement systems and things like that, we convened 3 committees that we called the Equity and Enhancement Committees. The first committee went out and they studied our athletic facilities and programs. A committee went out and studied our visual and performing art programs and the current state of technology in this school district. And they came back with recommendations. And some of the recommendations I think we're going to share with the board, and that is that all of our stadiums should have the same beautiful, attractive, safe, artificial surface that they have in every district in El Paso County except one, the Ysleta Independent School District. If Clint can have artificial surface at their stadium, if Van Horn can have artificial surface at their stadium, there's absolutely no way our students shouldn't have artificial surface on the stadium. And it would benefit our football program, it would benefit our track program, it would benefit our soccer program, it would benefit our band program. Very few people would not see a benefit from having that artificial surface. We spend $60,000 a year at each one of the 7 stadiums every year to bring that grass back. And depending on luck and depending on what happens during that year, that grass, that turf may be destroyed by November. If we're lucky, it may get to February, but when you've got football on it, and 3 levels of football, and 3 levels of soccer, that's $420,000 every year to regrow grass. I think all of our baseball and softball fields need lighting. I think we need to stop pulling kids out of class at 11 o'clock to go play a game at 2 o'clock so that they can finish the game before it gets dark at 5 or 6 o'clock. That's one thing. And it goes against our instructional ethos. And that is that instructional time in our schools is valuable. We don't want softball players and baseball players leaving class twice a week at 11 o'clock. But there's also another benefit. Why not let the players enjoy some of the same experience that basketball players enjoy and football players enjoy by allowing them to have games in the evening so that their parents can participate in their success? As it stands right now, parents typically have something else going on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We call it work, right? It's important. And so I tell people all the time, I played football and baseball in high school and in college. And in high school, I can count on one hand the number of times that my dad attended a baseball game. Just simply couldn't make it. When you work in the lumber mill, they like you to work a full day. I think that happens a lot in El Paso too. And so I think it would be terrific to be the only district that could host games in the evening because we've invested in lighting for our fields. Same can be said of our tennis court facilities at each of the high schools. Then those facilities may be available to the community in the evening. All of our schools belong to the community. We've talked about that. We've talked about the expansion of wrestling facilities and gymnastics facilities. A lot of people don't know, but we've got outstanding gymnastics teams that compete at the state level. We've got outstanding wrestlers in this community. Very, very good wrestlers in this community. And we're asking them to become world-class athletes in facilities that are embarrassing. The Bel Air facility, when it rains, it runs down the pipes and onto their mats because it's located under the bleachers at Bel Air. So I think we need to really take a look at some of these recommendations from these committees. Our Visual and Performing Arts Committee has suggested that we reinvest in facilities for our young students, band, orchestra, choir. And so one of the ideas is that we would also consider building the first performing arts center in the Ysleta Independent School District off Alameda, where we currently have the Fine Arts Annex. And it would be a two-tiered performing arts center that could accommodate anywhere from 2,500 people to 3,500 people for large performances. And the most important piece is that it would have a UIL-rated stage. Do you know that the Ysleta Independent School District does not have anywhere on any of its 7 campuses or otherwise a UIL-rated theater stage? And so when they go to Dallas or Austin or wherever they compete and they set up their backdrops and their props, they're usually too small for the stage because the UIL-rated stage is much bigger. And so they look out of place. The other schools that have the benefit of a stage that size, day in and day out, tend to outperform our thespians. Right? Our great swim teams, I didn't know this, but every time they go out to compete, they're already 20 points behind because they don't have a dive team. And all of the schools they compete against at regional and state have a dive team. And we don't have a dive team because we don't have a dive tank or a dive pool. Right? But ultimately, when we talk about equity and enhancement, it comes down to this. I don't want a student to be at a deficit because they attend one of our schools instead of one of the neighboring schools. I think our students have every bit as much right to the same kind of facilities and amenities and technology and athletic facilities as any other student in the city of El Paso. And I don't know if I could make that promise that they do now. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about resurrecting this district, reinventing it, and taking our rightful place as we have for over 100 years as a great, great choice for parents and students into the next 50, 100 years. Questions? When do we start? Soon, I'm hoping. Any questions? Anyone get heartburn? The property tax impact? Is that what? So it really depends on what the board ultimately decides in terms of the projects that will make up the package. So I think on the low end, we're looking at something in the 300 millions. I think the high end, if we were to be bold and aggressive, we're probably well into the 400 millions. But until we determine what we believe the community can support, it's hard to know. But I can tell you that the increase to the property tax rate needs to be looked through maybe a lens that hasn't been considered before. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. The Ysleta Independent School District currently has a $1.36 per $100 evaluation property tax rate. Socorro has $1.28. I believe El Paso has $1.33. So on paper, on the surface, it would appear that residents in the Ysleta Independent School District pay more taxes than the other two large school districts to provide a public school experience for children. Well, let's start with this. Let's assume that we have 3 homeowners, one in Ysleta, one in Socorro, and one in El Paso. So here's this, $100,000 home. Only one of these school districts lets you take 20% right off the top. That's right, the Ysleta Independent School District is the only district in El Paso County that years ago voted to give its residents a 20% tax exemption, homestead tax exemption. So before you even start to calculate the homestead exemption that's guaranteed by law, your home is already being valued for tax purposes at $80,000. Then you add the additional $15,000 guaranteed by law. Our $1.36 is applied to $65,000 in this case, and their lower tax rate, the $1.28 or the $1.33, is applied to an $85,000 value. And so when you look at the bottom, residents in the Socorro Independent School District pay $1,080 a year to support their schools. Residents in the Ysleta Independent School District, and by the way, do you see this $1.46? That's not our tax rate. Our tax rate's $1.36. That's what this homeowner would pay even with a $1.46 tax rate or a 10-cent increase. And 10 cents will guarantee you $430 million. $949. So even with a 10-cent increase in that scenario, you're still not paying as much as they're paying in YISD and in Socorro on a $100,000 house. That 20% is hard to overcome. You just increased the tax rate by 10 cents. You guaranteed the district $430 million, and you still aren't being asked to pay as much as they pay in those other two districts. Think about someone that owns a $400,000 house. Take 20% off a $400,000 house. That's $320,000. Take the 15% guaranteed by law. Now you're down to $305,000 on a $400,000 house. Even if you apply the $1.36 or the $1.46, you're not going to pay anywhere near what the $400,000 homeowner in El Paso or in Ysleta is going to pay. Because what they're going to pay is taxes on a $385,000 house, not on a $305,000 house. That 20% is huge. A lot of people don't know that. I remember going out to talk about the bond for Socorro and telling them that they should come to Socorro because the tax rate in Ysleta is $1.36. I had no idea that there was a 20% homestead exemption that not only levels the playing field, we just went up 10 cents and still didn't get to what they pay in those other two school districts. Anyway, yes, sir.
Yes, the aquatic center at the Indian Ridge site sounds very attractive, very appealing. My question, though, is how do you address the infrastructure, the parking and the streets? Because you're going to attract a lot of traffic. I live right across the street from Indian Ridge, and I really don't want to deal with that. So what's your plan to address it?
It's a very good question. One of the things that, in talking to at least some of the trustees that we, I think, have all agreed or have all agreed to consider is that we're in the business of educating children. And in the past, we typically dealt with new construction internally. This is the kind of project where we'd like to bring in a consultant, a program manager, someone that does this for a living every day that's going to provide the kind of egress and ingress that you need to avoid what you're describing. And a lot of elements go into that. Where they enter, where they exit, where the parking's located, operating hours, how we schedule the availability of the facilities, whether or not we have perimeter fencing that limits access to the facilities unless we want to provide access to the facilities. So there's a plan that goes behind every facility that you build, because we have the same situation if in fact we decide to rebuild Scottsdale. If we take and build a brand new Scottsdale on the backside of their property, it makes perfect sense. You're not interrupting or disrupting the education that those children are currently getting. What you forget is that now you've put the school right across the street from residences on 3 sides rather than on McRae that didn't have the residences, and those homeowners are going to want some guarantees that they can get in and out of their driveway and that they're not going to be inconvenienced with congestion. So we'd have to find a way to create entry and exit points that accommodate the neighbors, because we want the neighbors to support our new schools, not to resist new schools. So we'd likely have community meetings that would be part of the entire planning process to educate the communities and to get their input on what they want from the facility and what they absolutely don't think they can tolerate from the facility. But that's a great question. There's a hand over here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you. I am concerning about the camps for artificial garden. I understand that will be look nice and neat, but for the parents that have kids playing football or soccer, there is no more danger for kids to play on the artificial garden than instead of the natural garden?
No, as a matter of fact, it's been, I think, research has proven that playing on the artificial turf with the advances, there used to be a time where they used to lay artificial turf directly on top of concrete. Almost directly on top of concrete with a very thin pad, a pad that you might find under your carpet. What they do now is they lay that artificial surface on real fine gravel with an irrigation and everything. So it's actually safer, and it's reduced the number of concussions and injuries that student athletes suffer when installed appropriately. It's really nice and soft and spongy. I was never tackled, so I don't know what that's like, but I'm just kidding. I know what it's like very well. Yes?
Okay, sir. That plan to put on artificial turf on all the high schools, I'm sure that's going to save, you said, money on the watering and the water bill. So you're going to use that money to like pay for the electric bill on the new lights that you plan on doing, or what are you going to use that money that you save on?
We really haven't discussed how we would invest the money. It could be hopefully invested in something that's going to improve the environment for students, the learning environment. I think people sometimes overestimate the energy cost associated with lighting of athletic fields. It's really evolved over time. It isn't like it was when I was growing up. They have the new halogen lamps, they have the new LED lights. The lights are strategically placed on the field so you don't need as many lights. It's almost a science in terms of how they deal with lighting. What will likely offset that energy cost more than the artificial surface is that we'll have less schools, and that if in fact we're going in and replacing mechanical systems and electrical systems, it's likely that we will adopt energy efficient systems that will automatically turn lights off when students leave the room, that will automatically turn systems off at a certain time of the evening and turn them back on at a certain time in the morning. One of the biggest sources of energy are the number of computers that we have in our facilities. So a lot of schools have gone to a system where at a certain time in the evening, all of that shuts down. They all go to sleep, heavy sleep, and then they're not available again until the following morning at 6:30 or something like that. So energy consumption, and more importantly, energy preservation, has really made a lot of advances. And I think that by investing in our schools and building new schools, we actually reduce our use of energy rather than increase our use of energy. The one caveat is that in some cases we'll have to increase transportation, and that may offset some of the savings. Sir.
I hope that by the time I get done asking a question and trying to clarify some things with you, that I don't get rocks thrown at me, but I'm going to take a swing at it.
Put it out there. That's why we're
All
here.
right, no problem. I don't want to sound selfish, but I am. Okay, I'm from the Hanks High School area. I've been here since the early 80s. And to be quite frank with you, Mr. Superintendent, we're always playing second fiddle. And I know you've told us how much money it takes to refurbish some of these other high schools, the 7 high schools that you're talking about. Ysleta High School, they spent a ton of money. Bel Air, Eastwood, Parkland. What in the world do we get? We're always second fiddle. Tierra del Sol, they haven't done a darn thing to that school. How can we come to Hanks High School and the first thing we talk about is Bel Air and Del Valle?
I went in alphabetical order.
You know, I love those guys, you know. Don't get me wrong. You know, we should do everything for the kids. What you're proposing is excellent, you know what I'm saying? But somehow or another, we got to pay for all of this. This 20% deduction that we get in the YISD, you know, that was proposed a long time ago, okay? We had bond money way before the Anthony Trujillo era. We refinanced that bond money when the interest rates dropped from 8 and a quarter to 3 point something.
Yes, sir.
We utilized that money to refurbish these schools, and hopefully we're going to pay as you go to refurbish the schools. Granted, these schools are old, okay? Your vision is to build a school for the 21st and maybe umpteen hundred years from now, which is great. And what you're saying is true. Are you proposing that we do away with that 20%?
No, sir. I'm just
I
suggesting.
mean, that's a good start, because if you do that, I guarantee you that you'll be able to refurbish all the schools. But can we put Hanks High School first?
Yes, sir. Understood.
And by the way, this school district didn't spend a dead-gum dime in the baseball fields or the softball fields or the football fields. All that was donated
That's true.
by hard-working booster club members, because we got tired of seeing our kids getting their faces banged with a ball or God knows what. You know, we busted our tails for it, but you know, we've grown old. It's somebody else's turn to take a swing at the ball, but you're absolutely correct. Our schools are in bad shape. And the only thing is, though, that the YISD and the EPISD, we're landlocked. So we got to come up with some good ideas to rebuild our schools for the future generation that are currently here and will be coming in from the feeder schools. I just hope that when you guys start taking a look at how we're going to generate this revenue, it's not going to be a heavy burden on the taxpayer. And I'm going to be quite frank with you. I don't mind paying a little bit more money to help the school district.
Yes, sir.
Okay. But whatever we do, let's make sure that we don't get the same contractors that built the so-called sports center down here with the county, you know what I'm talking about, the sportsplex.
Oh, yes, sir.
And that's a total chaos. Let's get somebody that's qualified. Let's not waste our money. It's precious. So with that said, I better sit down before somebody kicks me.
No, I don't quarrel with anything you've said. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep, everything you said is absolutely true. And it's sad, but some of the schools that we're actually proposing to close and consolidate aren't that old. Aren't that old. They were built in the 80s and 90s, and so there's a great deal of concern when I talk to parents and constituents about how are you going to prevent that from happening in the future, and that's how I think we've arrived at the conclusion that we need the best and the brightest people that do this for a living to provide us with the kind of counsel and advice we need to make sure that doesn't happen ever again, because we've got schools that were built as early as 2003 that require a great deal of investment. Did she change her mind?
We're coming right back to her.
Okay.
Well, hopefully I don't get rocks thrown at me by the time this is all over with. Hearing a lot of the other things that were brought up, a lot of people are, which you stated the expense of football fields, and this gentleman pointed out right there that that's not accurate information because all of that has been donated by facilities and booster clubs.
That's not true.
Well,
The
it is true.
stadiums, the rebuilding of stadiums every year at $60,000 is strictly a district expense.
BC Landscape will tell you different, at least for this football field. And additionally, the cost that you're talking about to save each one of those football fields to put turf is $1 million a piece.
Is what, I'm sorry?
$1 million a piece per field.
I believe the quote we received is $700,000 apiece because the fields have already been prepared. When they installed the all-weather track, they went ahead and they prepared all of the fields for artificial turf that they assumed would be imminent in the future.
Okay, well, there's a lot of different bond things, and we've been through this before. We're just getting over all of the same deal that got shoved down our throat with a stadium downtown. Yeah, we got the Children's Hospital. This is a poor city. We're not what you're used to, the money you're used to dealing with out in California where you just came back from. We've dealt with these bond issues before. Prime example, right here, the theater right here that's here at Hanks.
Yes, sir.
You stated that nowhere in the district is there a UIL proper size stage. The funding was in that bond for this particular one, but funding was pulled out of that to be utilized on another high school because an administrator there complained because his school was not getting anything. That can be verified. You're talking about spending money to build up on Eastwood and make it a multi-level.
Yes.
But Eastwood is a declining enrollment area. You just said that. Right now, but my bottom line is before you come and start asking us for more money to spend on all of this fancy stuff, there's a lot of stuff. Prime example, Eastwood again. The enrollment level is down from what it was 10 years ago, correct?
The enrollment is highest at Eastwood High School when compared to all schools in the Ysleta Independent School District. It has 2,300 students.
Okay, but Eastwood today compared to what it was 10 years ago.
That would be true of all our schools, Hanks
Okay.
included.
So if we're going to be prudent with the money, shouldn't we start cutting some of the costs? Because it's also true that there are 6 assistant principals at Eastwood when there was 3 10 years ago, and there was more people there 10 years ago.
Okay.
Just those 3 assistant principals is $250,000 a year of unnecessary spending.
So
There's
three
a lot of
assistant-
administrative expenses that's
Understood.
going on here, and you're coming to us for $400 million. You're saying that redoing those schools at a third of a cost of, hell, let's spend the other 2/3. We don't have that kind of money in El Paso.
Well, that's the beauty of this, and maybe I can use his comments as an example. The beauty of this entire proposal is that I can't do it, the Board of Trustees can't do it. The only people that can make it happen are the voters. So nothing to get upset about. If you don't want it to happen, go down to the poll and vote no.
Well, I also understand that a lot of the other people need to do the same thing.
That's true.
The board members have already said in the paper before that they don't care what we think, they're going to do what they want.
No,
So-
what I'm trying to say is that without that money, without the $300 million or $350 or $420 million, this entire master facility plan as it's written today or as it will be presented to the board cannot become reality. So if the community feels the way you feel, all they really need to do is go down and oppose it, and it can't happen. It's not as if we have the money set aside and we can make the investment whether you like it or not. The only way the investment can be made is if the community decides that it's an investment they can support, right?
With all of the flash you're talking about and moving people back and forth, has anything been considered as far as the small campuses, like these small valley campuses you're talking about, and you bus their children 5 miles away and mom doesn't have a car to pick them up if they're sick? They're the same thing right here. You're talking about moving the people from up here back and forth. There's a lot of families that
I'm
don't have
sure
the
if we all think
transportation
long
issues.
and hard, we can come up with 1,000 reasons why we shouldn't do this.
I think the gentleman sort of touched on my next question, and that was, what is the busing situation going to look like? Because if you're consolidating school, I would imagine children would need to travel further to attend school. So I wanted to
So
see
the
what
school
you...
district would assume responsibility for providing transportation, especially in cases where there are main thoroughfares, large streets that present a danger to students.
So you think you would be adding more buses, bus routes, more traffic?
More routes, probably not more buses, because we've had a decline in enrollment, and at one time we had buses that could accommodate more students.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am. Well, when we finalize the list and make final recommendations, and then the board, and prior to the board considering it, we'd have an estimated cost. But the cost will vary depending on the price of fuel. So if we were to do it today, when fuel is at an all-time low, we'd end up with one figure that could change significantly 6 months from now. So we have to understand that fuel is a variable that is hard to predict or project. There isn't nearly as much as you think, though. Yes?
Yes, sir. Much like the gentleman over here, I do feel that this is kind of like being rammed down our throats because we're just being offered one opportunity. I wanted to know, is there any alternatives other than rebuilding? Has there anybody even thought into restructuring?
Yes, sir.
And
There is
so
some
what-
restructuring.
Well, why is that not being presented to us?
Consolidation is a form of restructuring.
Basically, well, the only thing that I've heard you say to us tonight is that my understanding is that we're planning to knock down schools and rebuild brand new ones.
In some cases.
This community, all of El Paso City, we are very traditional. We like our children to stay within our means. Also, the gentleman also mentioned being bused 5 miles away. Well, it's not just being bused, but it's having to purchase buses. That's going to be an extensive cost as well.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm a proud Hanks parent, Hanks High School and Ariel Washington parent, and I was just wondering if there are any expectations as far as investing at the proper time for, like they say, the wrestling gym that we have here at Hanks. Our girls are amazing. They bring you state championships trophies every year. My daughter being part of that, I'm very proud of the team. Are there any plans to invest now before the proposal goes through that we could expect any changes?
No, there are not any plans at present to invest in the wrestling facility at Hanks at present.
Oh, that's sad. Thank you.
We have a question over here on your left, Dr. De La Torre.
Oh,
Okay, so I came to Hanks. I know I look a little young, but that was 10 years ago. I agree with all the sports thing, but I like your vision. I think that it is important if you look at it in, academically, the way you're saying, because look at the way they are learning. They are on iPads. I just graduated as a teacher. So I'm substituting for now, and I see what you're saying. At first, I didn't see it that way because I just knew Hanks and Glen Cove and things like that. But once you go into the other schools, you see that they are in need. And I completely support your vision. I like where you're going academically. It's not all about sports because some of us don't have kids that are in sports. But with that being said, I wanted to ask if you're consolidating the schools, bringing one school with the other, what happens to teachers?
It's a common question. It's been asked at every one of the meetings, and one of the common misconceptions is that when you consolidate a school that teachers and teachers' jobs are placed in jeopardy. Because we staff based on student enrollment, because we use a formula to determine the number of teachers required to educate a specific number of students, when students leave one school to become part of another school, the teachers typically go with them, the support staff will go with them, the cafeteria staff will go with them. The positions that aren't included in that are typically, you only need one principal, you only need one nurse, you may only need one librarian, but we all have to understand that every year we have over 200 educators leave the district, resign, retire, relocate, promote, with careful, thoughtful, deliberate planning. Because keep in mind that, let's take for example, if we were to consolidate Hillcrest and Ranchland Hills, it would take approximately 24 months before the new Bel Air Middle School is ready. Over that 24-month period, 400 people will leave the district, including administrators, teachers, and support staff. With careful planning, vacancies are set aside to accommodate everybody. One of the things that the board has been very firm about is that there can be no adverse impact on people. It cannot result in any kind of a reduction in force. It can't result in a reduction in administrators, that we have to find a way to accommodate everyone. And when you're a district or an organization this large that sees that kind of turnover every year, it's easy to do. It's easy to do. Yes, ma'am. That's true.
My husband and I were considering building a house here, but after looking at this, I don't want a house. I'd rather live in an apartment.
Okay.
Because children can't pass this standardized test, but we're here to build more technology. The only thing that my kids learn when they come home is the test. And I felt like, how come they don't have basic skills that we were taught in school? And I'm kind of saddened for the community because you guys will get this beautiful school based on everybody's hard work. But our kids can't pass these tests. We need more investment in teaching the kids how to pass this test so that the district can get their money from the state. And it's sad because the state predicates their statistics on each one of these parents not going out to vote, not having a say-so, because they're tired. So they're like, of course they're not going to go down to a board. They're not going to do anything. We depend on their like being nonchalant, right? Because you guys are smart. You guys do demographic studies, urban studies, and stuff like that. But it's like, if the kids can't pass the test, if they can't graduate, if they keep being held back, if they can't go and advance, what good does it make to build all this stuff? Like, we need to educate them.
Perfect. She makes a great point. The data I've seen indicates that there is quite a high percentage of students in the Ysleta Independent School District that do, in fact, pass the test at every grade level in all 4 content subjects. Highest performance, highest pass rate on end of course exams. So There may be some students that are not experiencing that level of success, but I think it would be just a slight distortion of the truth to imply that students in this school district don't pass standardized tests. They do, and they do it at a higher rate than most school districts. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I've been sitting here and I've been hearing everybody and really didn't want to say nothing, but I just can't take it no more. So I completely disagree with saying that our children aren't learning at school. My little girl's gifted and talented. She gets straight A's.
Thank you.
Do we put a lot of hard work at home to make sure she gets straight A's? Yes. That's on us, parents, not on the school.
Thank you.
If your kid's not passing reading, we need to read more with your kid at home. They only have a certain amount of time in class. Second, we can't sit here and complain about our facilities being horrible when we're not willing to give 10 cents to make them better, right? Yes, we are traditional in El Paso. It's good when you're eating menudo. It's not good when you want to grow and advance and be something better. You know, so I mean, if we want change, it costs money. We can't depend on the school just to come up with all this imaginary money. It doesn't work that way. This is real life. It's like a business. If we're going to invest in it, maybe not you, maybe not your kids, but I guarantee you that your grandkids are going to reap the benefits of it. Artificial fields, they save money. My kid plays football. It's a lot safer for them. Trust me, read the statistics on the injuries on having a grass field, right? And if your kid has allergies, he's not going to play on that field anyway, right? If it's artificial turf, it's a lot safer, it's a lot better. We save money, it's better for the kids, and I'm sorry, but Ysleta is giving my girl a good education. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to say, my name is Victor Gutierrez, and I just want you to know that I'm a parent, part of the community of Ysleta Independent School District, and I was part of that committee that was hired, or that, not hired, but brought on to visit every 63 of these schools, okay? So we went in there, and I was part of the facilities committee, so I got to see firsthand the schools, the elementaries, the middle schools. And as a parent and a community and as a taxpayer, then yes, once you guys are aware of what the needs are in our schools, then you would understand where this growth is going. To answer the question as far as technology, we need the technology to advance and so that our children can pass those exams. Because through technology, they learn more, because that's how they're learning now. If you give a kid, right here, she's got her phone, and she probably can handle it better than I can or any adult can. And that's how they learn, through technology. So a lot of these schools are not adequate to have that technology, so we can't push them to go any further without that technology. So just so that you guys know, as part of a person in the community and a taxpayer, this is a great bond, and you all should really look into it and do your due diligence and your homework and see what they have to offer before you go out there and vote.
Thank you.
Hi, I had an opinion about the technology. I'm 27 years old. I like technology and everything, but to me, I'm old-fashioned. I'm traditional, just like the gentleman said right now. My daughter is in GT, straight honor student, very proud of her. But I don't have the resource of a computer. I don't have the resource of internet, but I do have the motivation to let her know, you know, you can do, I don't have it, but there's resources out there to do it. I'm not saying let's not improve the schools. I'm not saying let's not do it. Yes, technology is important, but to me, it's not everything. If we can do it, we can do it. If that's what we vote for, we'll go do it. But it's not necessary. If we did it, in the past years, if our parents, if our grandparents did it and they graduated, and right now they're principals, teachers, why do we have to have that technology? And it's just my opinion.
Thank you. And I may have not alluded to that, but I don't want to walk by it right now. There is nothing more important than the person in the four corners of the classroom, than the teacher. I agree with that. All the technology in the world isn't going to offset a poor teacher. We have the benefit, thank God, of having outstanding teachers in this school district that have done so much with so little. But technology is a tool, is an instrument that can be leveraged to engage students who are growing up in a world that's very different than the world that you and I grew up in, very different than the world that your grandparents or my grandparents grew up in. More and more of what we used to do by hand is being done by machine, which is making the relevant labor market more reliant on this and less reliant on these, and that's a problem. We need to have more students in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Teachers, yes. Administrators, yes. But what I've heard the Chamber of Commerce share an interest in is having more Fortune 500 companies, corporate headquarters, computer scientists, Dell, HP, those type of companies come to El Paso. They will never come to El Paso if they don't believe that El Paso can provide the labor force. And right now, they're not convinced we can provide the labor force. And UTEP is working very hard with local school districts to try to get more students in their engineering program so that those companies might consider coming here. But you make a good point. Let me just close with this. I know that it's a huge investment. I didn't go out to try and create something little. I've got 5 children. 4 of them are in our schools. Like you, I want the best possible experience for them, but this is a proposal, or likely to become a proposal, that neither I or the board can make a decision on. Ultimately, the voting public will decide whether or not this is excessive or too expensive or unnecessary. It really is a true form of democracy. I don't have the money to do what I just described to you. The only way I can do what I just described to you is if you decide you'd like to provide us the resources to do that. Otherwise, it's one of those 2 words. We reconvene, we go back, we huddle up, and we figure out what we can do with the current resources we have. But let me tell you what the definition of decay is. Anytime you're not getting better, you're decaying. And some of the problems and some of the challenges that we're facing today aren't going to go away a year from now. They're not going to go away 5 years from now. They're not going to go away 10 years from now. We get one chance to make a difference. And if it's not this year, I understand, because ultimately you have to decide whether or not you feel comfortable investing in these schools. And if you don't, I honor that. I respect that. I go back to work and I'll focus on what this young lady mentioned, and that is making sure that more students are proficient in English, that more students are literate, that more students write well, that more students take 8th grade algebra, that more students graduate and go to colleges and universities. I know how to do that. This isn't my first rodeo. I've been a school superintendent and involved in schools, and I've passed 3 bonds. This is the bond that you'll have to determine whether or not, if we arrive at the conclusion that we'd like to consider a bond, you can support. That's why we're here, not to try and, as I think was mentioned, force it down anybody's throat, but to give you an idea of what is possible. That's all. What kind of potential and possibility is out there for the kids in this school district? I thank you for your time, and I appreciate all of the comments and all of the feedback, and we'll see how things go. Thanks.